It's week 12 of the NFL season, and here are my predictions for this week. But first, how did I do last week in my predictions? In week 11, I went 9-6 in wins and losses, and against the spread, I went 4-11. But before getting into the video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. So kicking off the week on Thursday Night Football, we have the 7-3 Bills versus the 5-5 Texans. The Bills are coming off a 44-32 win over the Buccaneers, where Josh Allen went 19 of 30, 317 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, while also having 3 rushing touchdowns. Then James Cook had 48 yards rushing and 3 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. And Tyrell Shavers led the team with 4 receptions, 90 yards and a touchdown. Then the Texans are coming off a 16-13 win over the Titans, and Davis Mills went 26 of 41, 274 yards and a touchdown. Then Woody Marks had 44 yards rushing, and Nico Collins had 9 receptions, 92 yards and a touchdown. And CJ Stroud has been rolled out for his 3rd game in a row with his concussion, so Davis Mills is going to be starting again. But this still should be a pretty good matchup. The Bills have one of the best offenses in the NFL. They're 2nd in yards per game with 387. They're 1st in rushing yards per game at 147. And they're 4th in points per game at 29. But the Texans arguably have the best defense in the NFL. They're allowing the least amount of yards per game at 258 and the least points per game at 16. But the Bills have one of the best passing defenses in the NFL, allowing the 2nd least passing yards per game at 169. So I have the Bills winning, but I have the Texans covering the 5.5 point spread. Then moving over to Sunday, we have the 8-2 Colts versus the 5-5 Chiefs. The Colts are coming off their bye week, and in their last game in week 10, they beat the Falcons 31-25 in Berlin, Germany. And then for the Chiefs, they're coming off a 22-19 loss against the Broncos, and in that game, Patrick Mahomes went 29 of 45, 276 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Then Kareem Hunt had 59 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Travis Kelce had 9 receptions, 91 yards and a touchdown. So right now, the Chiefs have lost 2 games in a row, and they're facing one of the best teams in the NFL in the Colts. But Daniel Jones is starting to come back down to earth in the last 2 games. He's had 7 turnovers in his last 2 games, with 4 interceptions, and he's fumbled 6 times, but 3 of them were turnovers. And the Chiefs are really good at home. They're 4-1 this season, and I just can't see the Chiefs losing 3 games in a row. So I have the Chiefs winning and covering the 3.5 point spread. Then we have the 6-4 Steelers versus the 7-3 Bears. The Steelers are coming off a 34-12 win over the Bengals, where Aaron Rodgers started off the game 9 of 15, 116 yards and a touchdown. But Aaron Rodgers did leave this game early with a fractured left wrist, and he is questionable this week. But Mason Rudolph went 12 of 16, 127 yards and a touchdown. Then Jaylen Warren had 62 yards rushing, and he's questionable this week as well. And Kenneth Gainwell led the team in receiving with 7 receptions, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Then for the Bears, they're coming off a 19-17 win over the Vikings, where they entered the 4th quarter up 16-3 and would allow 2 touchdowns, with the last one coming with 50 seconds left in the game. And the Vikings actually took a 17-16 lead, but the Bears ended up returning the kickoff for 56 yards down to Minnesota's 40. And they were able to run the ball 3 times, then kick the walk-off field goal. And overall, Caleb Williams went 16 of 32, 193 yards. DeAndre Swift had 90 yards rushing, and Cole Kmet had 5 receptions and 45 yards. Then on defense, Kevin Byard III got his 5th interception of the season, and Nashawn Wright had his 4th interception of the season. And after that win, the Bears are now in 1st place in the NFC North, and they're one of the hottest teams in the NFL, winning 7 out of their last 8 games. So I have the Bears winning and covering the 3-point spread. Then we have the 9-2 Patriots versus the 3-7 Bengals. The Patriots are coming off a 27-14 win over the Jets, where Drake May went 25 of 34, 281 yards and a touchdown. Then Travion Henderson had a very good game with 62 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns, while also having 5 receptions, 31 yards and a touchdown. Then Stephon Diggs led the team with 9 receptions and 105 yards. Then in the Bengals loss against the Steelers, Joe Flacco went 23 of 40, 199 yards, a touchdown and an interception. Then Chase Brown had 99 yards rushing. Then T. Higgins had 3 receptions, 63 yards and a touchdown. Then this week, Jamar Chase will be suspended after spitting on Jalen Ramsey, so I have the Patriots winning and covering the 8.5 point spread. Then the 2-8 Jets versus the 5-5 Ravens. In the Jets' loss over the Patriots, Justin Fields went 15 of 26, 116 yards and a touchdown, and led the team with 67 yards rushing and a touchdown. And John Mechie III had 3 receptions, 45 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Ravens, they're coming off a 23-16 win over the Browns, and in that game, Lamar Jackson was shut down by the Browns defense, going just 14 of 25, 193 yards and 2 interceptions, and was sacked 5 times, and he had a passer rating of just 47, and this was by far his worst game of the season, but they still won. Then Derrick Henry had a good game with 103 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Zay Flowers had 3 receptions for 78 yards. But the Ravens defense played good, having 3 sacks and an interception, and held the Browns to just 187 yards and 2 of 14 on third downs. So this week the Jets are switching quarterbacks to Tyrod Taylor. I don't know how much that's going to help them, but they have been more competitive the last 3 weeks. So I have the Ravens winning, but I have the Jets covering the 13.5 point spread. Then the 7-3 Seahawks versus the 1-9 Titans. The Seahawks are coming off a 21-19 loss against the Rams, and Sam Darnold went 29 of 44, 279 yards and 4 interceptions. Then Kenneth Walker had 67 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Jackson Smith-Njigba had 9 receptions and 105 yards. And in the Titans' loss against the Texans, Cam Ward went 24 of 37, 194 yards and a touchdown, and led the team with 33 yards rushing. Then Chig Okonkwo had 3 receptions and 56 yards. So I have the Seahawks bouncing back and getting the win and covering the 13-point spread. Then the 4-6 Vikings versus the 6-3-1 Packers. J.J. McCarthy played really bad, going 16 of 32, 150 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions, and he had just a 47 passer rating, and he's been pretty bad on the season as well, having just a 52% completion percentage, a 61 passer rating, and a 26 QBR. But even with him struggling, they've still been very competitive. Then Aaron Jones had 70 yards rushing, and Justin Jefferson had 5 receptions and 61 yards. Then the Packers are coming off a 27-20 win over the Giants, and this game came down to the 4th quarter, where they're down 20-19, but Jordan Love ended up connecting with Christian Watson for a 17-yard touchdown, and got the 2-point conversion to take a 7-point lead with 4 minutes and 2 seconds left. But the Giants did drive down the field, and they got all the way down to Green Bay's 14-yard line, but Jameis ended up throwing an interception in the end zone, so that's how the Packers won. But overall, Jordan Love went 13 of 24, 174 yards and 2 touchdowns, and early on in the game, he had to come out, and Malik Willis went 2 of 2, 6 yards and a touchdown. Then Emmanuel Wilson had 40 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Romeo Doubs had 4 receptions and 53 yards. And Christian Watson had 2 receiving touchdowns. But Josh Jacobs did leave this game early with a knee injury, and he's listed as week to week, so he will be questionable this week. Then the Vikings have lost 4 out of their last 5 games, so I have the Packers winning and covering the 6.5 point spread. Then the 2-9 Giants versus the 6-4 Lions. In the Giants' loss against the Packers, Jameis Winston went 19 of 29, 201 yards and an interception, and he also ran for a touchdown. Then Tyrone Tracy had 88 yards rushing, and Devin Singletary had 2 rushing touchdowns. And on defense, Brian Burns had 2 sacks, and he's now up to 13 on the season. Then for the Lions, they're coming off a 16-9 loss on Sunday Night Football to the Eagles, and Jared Goff went 14 of 37, 255 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then Jahmyr Gibbs had 39 yards rushing, and led the team with 5 receptions and 107 yards. But before that game, they did play Sam Laporta on the IR with a back injury, so he's going to be out a while. But as of right now, Jackson Dart is still in the NFL's concussion protocol, but the Giants are optimistic that he will be back by Sunday. So overall, I have the Lions winning, but I have the Giants covering the 10.5 point spread. Then the 6-4 Jaguars versus the 3-7 Cardinals. The Jaguars are coming off a blowout win, 35-6 over the Chargers. And Trevor Lawrence went 14 of 22, 153 yards, a touchdown and an interception, while also having a rushing touchdown. Then Bishal Tootin had 74 yards and a rushing touchdown, and Jacoby Myers had 5 receptions and 64 yards. And on defense, they had 3 sacks and an interception, while also holding the Chargers to just 135 yards and 6 points. Then the Cardinals are coming off a 41-22 loss against the 49ers, and Jacoby Brissett had some crazy stats in this game. He even broke the NFL record for completions in a game, going 47 of 57, 452 yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Then Bam Knight had 24 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Michael Wilson had 15 receptions and 185 yards. And Trey McBride had 10 receptions, 115 yards and a touchdown. Like, the Cardinals are a weird team to me. I feel like they have a solid roster, and they've been putting up some pretty good stats, but they're just not winning. But the Cardinals are 4-0 versus Jacksonville since 2009, so I have the Cardinals winning. Then the 2-8 Browns versus the 2-8 Raiders. Dylan Gabriel started off going 7 of 10 for 68 yards, but he did get a concussion. So Shedeur Sanders made his NFL debut, and he went 4 of 16, 47 yards and an interception. So he played pretty bad, but it's just one half. It's not the end of the world. But he is most likely going to start this week versus the Raiders, with Gabriel still in the concussion protocol. Then Quinshon Judkins had 59 yards rushing, and Cedric Tillman had 3 receptions and 52 yards. Then on defense, Myles Garrett had another crazy game, with 4 sacks and 5 tackles for loss, and he's already up to 15 sacks on the season, and he's currently on pace to break the single season sack record of 22.5, and he's on pace for 25.5. Then the Raiders are coming off a 33-16 loss against the Cowboys, and Geno Smith went 27 of 42, 238 yards, a touchdown and an interception, and he led the team with 14 yards rushing. Then Brock Bowers had 7 receptions and 72 yards. With how good that Browns defense is, they're going to keep this one close, and it should be very exciting to see Shedeur Sanders make his first career start. But the Browns have lost 13 road games in a row, so I have the Raiders winning, but the Browns covering the 3.5 point spread. Then the 3-7 Falcons versus the 2-8 Saints. The Falcons are coming off a 30-27 loss against the Panthers in overtime, and Michael Penix started this game off 13 of 16 for 175 yards, and he left the game early with a knee injury. And Kirk Cousins went 6 of 14 with 48 yards. Then Bijan Robinson had 104 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and Drake London had 7 receptions for 119 yards, but he also left early with a knee injury, and he is expected to miss this week. And with Michael Penix, he was placed on the IR and is most likely out for the season, with a bone bruise in his knee and a partially torn ACL. Then for the Saints, they're coming off their bye week, and in their last game, they beat the Panthers 17-7, and the rookie quarterback Tyler Shuck played really good in that game. And this season really sucks for the Falcons, since the Falcons traded away their first round pick in last year's draft, and they just haven't been playing good. So I have the Saints winning and covering the 1.5 point spread. Then the 8-2 Eagles versus the 4-5-1 Cowboys. In the Eagles win over the Lions, Jalen Hurts went 14 of 28 with 135 yards and a rushing touchdown. Then Saquon Barkley had 83 yards rushing, and A.J. Brown had 7 receptions for 49 yards. Then for the Cowboys, in their win against the Raiders, Dak Prescott went 25 of 33, 268 yards and 4 touchdowns. Then Javonte Williams had 93 yards rushing, and George Pickens had 9 receptions, 144 yards and a touchdown. And on defense, they had 4 sacks and an interception. This should be a pretty good game this week, but the Eagles are going to be without the right tackle Lane Johnson for 4 to 6 weeks with a foot injury. But with all the Cowboys' struggles on defense, I have the Eagles winning and covering the 3.5-point spread. Then on Sunday Night Football, the 6-4 Buccaneers versus the 8-2 Rams. In the Buccaneers' loss against the Bills, Baker Mayfield went 16 of 28, 173 yards, a touchdown and an interception, while also having 39 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Then Sean Tucker had 106 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and 2 receptions, 34 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Rams, in their win over the Seahawks, Matt Stafford went 15 of 28, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kyren Williams had 91 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Puka Nacua had 7 receptions and 75 yards. Then on defense, they had 4 interceptions. But this week, Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin are still questionable, and the Rams are still one of the best teams in the NFL, so I have the Rams winning and covering the 6.5-point spread. Then finally, on Monday Night Football, we have the 6-5 Panthers versus the 7-4 49ers. In the Panthers' win over the Falcons, Bryce Young went 31 of 45, 448 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that was by far his best game of his career. Then Rico Dowdle had 45 yards rushing, and Tedero McMillan had 8 receptions, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then in the 49ers win over the Cardinals, Brock Purdy went 19 of 26, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then Christian McCaffrey had 81 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and 5 receptions, 40 yards and a touchdown. And George Kittle led the team with 6 receptions, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So this is actually turning into a pretty good matchup. The Panthers have been one of the most surprising teams in the NFL this season, and they have a really good offense. I think this game is just going to be determined if their defense can hold up. But I think the Panthers could make the upset, so I have the Panthers winning. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.